I would like to first start by thanking Sandra, Soto-Santiago, and Glorynel, Ojeda, which were our student cohort facilitators. They had to fly out to Puerto Rico and Arizona, so I'm their representative today. During the student cohort session, we follow a dialogue process in which students went from individual reflections to small group discussions. After those discussions, students collectively negotiated the final outcome for each deliverable. During the first day, we were working on a mission statement, and the mission statement is as follows. RISE promotes an open transdisciplinary network amplifying students' voices in allocating university resources for the following: validating and integrating participatory community-centered research to promote sustainability and resilience to disasters and crises. Hope, justice, information, ideas, and new perspectives on how do we approach climate change. During the second day, our main question was, what do we need to do? I'm gonna be reading a list that we developed as a cohort focused on forms to support actions divided into students across the different universities. So what is needed from research or community work? Well, first, develop a glossary of terms to be able to understand the meaning of these terms for each disciplines, because we all come from different backgrounds and we want to have a common understanding of what resilience or power, all these different terms mean for us. Develop the RISE network in terms of relationship building, connections, and identifying institutional champions that can facilitate support and actions from their institutions. Emphasize community university partnerships, engage in activism, recognize our privileges, and foster using said power towards justice. Create a database with all the collaborating institutions, the impact contact, and people and support that they can offer. In terms of individual supports for students in RISE, well, we first started by discussing services for displaced students. For example, establish a system of financial support, which can involve tuition waivers, housing, food, and related. Provide language supports for students who are not bilingual, and as has it been previously discussed, only 10% of people in Puerto Rico speak English, so if it were, for example, in Puerto Rico, we would need help with bilingual. Not everybody is bilingual. And importantly, identify mentors in host institutions. As the list demonstrates, the bulk of the work currently lies in developing these forms of support and carrying out the actions required before disasters so that afterwards this can be implemented. Lastly, today we were discussing how do we measure it. So for this, students discussed the system that is needed to be implemented in each institution to provide the support and the form of assessment or metrics required to measure the success. We did it through individual student support. We think that a good idea would be have regional RISE advisors to connect to institutions that are part of RISE in that region. Each institution will facilitate the data collection. It is important to have both qualitative and quantitative data to be able to also document the experiences of the students. This also requires data facilitation that is accessible to anyone who does not have knowledge in data analysis. Lastly, from the research, university, and community perspective, utilizing the database in order to deposit and analyze data on projects that are focused on serving learning in each institution. Creating a listserv or social platform that helps organize documents the work that it is being conducted. This will also serve as a way to measure engagement. And lastly, design a system to record and document service with a common structure that can be able to be tracked, crossed, and evaluated. Thank you.
Our mission statement is to connect universities and to create a transdisciplinary, transorganizational trans-institutional and transnational collaboratory that provides a destination to deliver new paradigms of interactions and collaborations for higher education, to provide a platform where students, faculty, and administrators work with the communities they serve on all dimensions of sustainability and resilience, and to ensure that universities rise above opportunistic research and toward long-term sustainable futures. I want to make just a few comments on this. I think as RISE, and these are some of the conversations that were reflected during the workshop, trying to find ways of being a little bit more specific in our mission statements as we refine what RISE is, I think is really important. I want to go through and kind of read through some of the goals that we identified. So key to achieving this mission statement, to provide a shared repository of best practices, lessons learned, and case studies. Goal number 2 that we identified, to facilitate a deeper understanding of the communities that we engage. Goal number 3, to increase the value and incorporation of local knowledge in academic research, teaching, and learning. Goal number 4, to better organize university response efforts and university research with communities impacted by disasters, i.e. to make universities more effective. Goal number 5, to establish pre-disaster agreements that allow universities to respond faster and with greater efficiency to community partners, students, and faculty. And then we had 2 kind of broader goals that encompass, I think, everything that was listed above, but to seek social justice and social change, and to minimize climate casualties at large. So I don't have time to read through all the different ideas that were identified to achieve these different goals, but I do want to read through a few of them. I think a few conversations that cross different cohorts and that cross different groups within the room. One of the key things is identifying this research repository, a place where we can access all of our knowledge, a place where we can not only collect but peer review and provide certainty that the research that we're sharing, not only with each other but with our communities, is of a quality and is dependable and actionable. Another piece that I think was really powerful was a whole kind of series of projects that centered around local and community knowledge. So we look to identify projects that focus on the documentation of local stories and projects, and through this to gather and distribute local knowledge, as well as to create a repository of contacts on the ground that allow us to facilitate this research quicker and more effectively. And then to find ways of establishing projects that transform institutional knowledge into best practices, and to incorporate feedback loops into these best practices that allow it to be reflective of community experiences. So they're dynamic and they change over time as we learn. And that these best practices are made available through our repository to everybody, not just to academics, but also to the communities who share and to the public at large, an open source network. I think one of the last kind of project ideas that I wanted to share that came out of the conversation was this idea of regional RISE hubs. So we're looking kind of immediately to try and establish an initial network of university partners to help foster this RISE idea. And within that to create a RISE liaison at participating institutions that would be an interface between the RISE network and the RISE communities, or in the local communities rather. And this person would hold local knowledge, would maintain local relationships, and would kind of overall be considered a good neighbor within this kind of collaboration. I want to look a little bit and kind of close up here real quick and just talk about a few of the metrics attached to both the repository and this idea of the cohort. So within the repository, establishing metrics for content quality, so finding ways of establishing vetting processes that include, both peer and community review processes, and then looking at establishing a couple of different content types immediately. So accepting, obviously, content-based research, but also projects and reports on community knowledge transfer. Some design aspects that we thought we would consider. Looking at whatever the interface of this platform would be dynamic, that there would be an ease of use so that people from different orientations could easily use the platform, and that the aesthetics of it were such that it would kind of, inspire extended use. We would also look to create impact indicators that are both quantitative and qualitative. So we might be able to evaluate the success of our network by number of publications or number of transactions that happened across the network, but as well find ways of qualitatively evaluating it based on its impact. And then just a few thoughts on the RISE hubs and the RISE liaisons. These would maintain lists of local needs and would find ways of connecting external resources to local issues, would also maintain a list of local experts and connect these experts to the larger RISE network. This could potentially be articulated through a set of tiers or phases, so not every single regional RISE hub would have to be the same, would have to be the same scale, have the same investment, or kind of expect to live for the same duration, but are flexible based on specific regions and specific contexts. And we would, of course, evaluate these based on number, how many people, communities, institutions would be involved, and try to find ways of also evaluating it based on its connectivity. So that's what I have. Thank you.
All right, so I'll give a brief report out from the practitioner and researcher working group. We created kind of a visual schematic, which we'll be able to share with folks later. Really, the overarching principle guiding the mission that we kind of collectively came together around focuses on the transformation from theory to practice and our role working together, transforming universities to do collaborative, usable research to address disaster management challenges, climate change vulnerability, and systemic injustices. Cool, so we have the images now, so I can click through and get to see them that way. So this overarching component of theory to practice, another key component is the idea of co-design of research and action in collaboration with communities and the integration of diverse types of knowledge and diverse stakeholders in the process. Another foundation is the holistic systems approach across all the phases of disaster management and embedded within any work on disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation to address equity and power dynamics. And a theme that we kept coming back to that's so important is we really want to resist the tendency to want to reinvent the wheel and to really function as a network of networks connecting important work that's already underway. So the goal of coordination, taking stock of resources that exist and the gaps, and collectively learning together. So from there, this led us to identifying some sort of action items or action goals around defining governance structures for the network that are engage diverse stakeholders and have diverse input. Identifying some legal frameworks that guide disaster response activities and creating trainings and resources for researchers and community members to understand legal issues embedded in their work and to identify opportunities for advocacy for legal change for more effective disaster management and response. And working together to have key operational systems in place that will sustain the network. This actually parallels a lot of what some of the other groups have identified with a vision for RISE fellows who are trained as a cohort and work at their institutions and their communities to educate others, to work collaboratively and share lessons in their work. And so we identified this as having several directions or areas for fellows who are researchers, who are student-led, and the idea of student association chapters based at universities, the idea of engagement, training, and education through other forms of community institutions, including K through 12, K through 16 institutions. And connected to this is the idea of building capacity of local leaders, programs that connect people who are local leaders with resources and access to political power to be more impactful and effective in their leadership. Identifying ethical principles to guide research and action within this community, and coming together to develop a data directory that would unite existing repositories of data and information and resources. So connected to all of these things, we identified some specific metrics today. I won't get into the details of these, we can discuss later, because I just want to show you the incredible dynamic conversations and team that we had coming together to work together. So thanks for everything over the last few days.
So, hi, my name is Mark Lichtenstein. I'm one of the facilitators for our group, which Oscar's going to explain to you. But before we do that, could you raise your hand in the audience if you were involved in our awesome cohort? Take a look at the number of people that are still here from our cohort. And Javier, right there, just Javier, put your hand up. One of our great note takers, and we had some other students that were awesome that had to leave. But Oscar, co-facilitator with me, did a fantastic job from UPR Mayaguez, and is going to lead us through the discussion of what we did in our cohort.
Thank you all for the opportunity firsthand, right? And it's going to be a hard follow-up with that presentation, but I'll do my best. So,
the faculty members, they have all the resources.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, right, these are the logos from the universities and research institutions, but not the federal and communities that are here present. And following up on what Mark said, I just want to recognize your presence and thank you for being here. Recognizing that the mission statement, the theory of change, and the indicators and criteria in our cohort were deeply intertwined, we kind of simplified it into elements for RISE, which are going to be established here in this white presentation, more simple presentation. So first, and I'm going to sound a little bit redundant because the different cohorts managed to touch the same points. And so the first one is how can RISE be a knowledge of network of be a knowledge of network of trusted voices and a source and resource of information, research, and analyst complexity, right? And as the colleague stated, be a clearinghouse or repository of information that welcomes and values different perspectives, is inclusive, equitable, with a focus on social justice and diversity, and has the particular attention to break down the barriers and reduce fragmentation. And with that, have some set of ethical requirements that respect local populations and don't trample the most vulnerable communities. Also, RISE from our cohort was seen as a third-party validator and policy changer that should be recognized by different federal agencies and help function as a red team or B team, models like the CDC use that could aid congressional and other legislators in taking whatever policy is being developed and breaking it down and providing constructive criticism. And likewise, be a watchdog of the allocation of resources, making sure that when disaster strikes and we got to respond, all the funding really ends up where it's supposed to end up. Next, well, we see RISE as a convener and coordinator platform / repository, that provides forums, mediation, and capacity building. One thing that was mentioned a lot was not reinventing the wheel, so we have to do a landscape characterization of what already exists, different models on the federal and state and local communities, so we know what specific niche is not being attended, so RISE could fulfill that gap. And with this, establish a baseline of common understanding which we could use to redefine resiliency. Throughout this process of RISE, we should take in consideration and augment the process and frameworks by including communities and indigenous people before, during, and after developing policy, and take into deep consideration what they are contributing, recognizing their sovereignty and self-determination. And as Anais mentioned, also provide a platform of opportunities, funding opportunities, to implement research, effective research on the disaster cycles. This means all the stages of pre, post disaster. RISE should also have a research and organizational coordination unit for it to be an effective repository of information, meaning we have to have delegates that have this specific task in analyzing all the information that is available and actually punctualizing what is missing and what is not, and being having the repository, a web portal. It could also be an app that functions offline, because when disaster strikes, Wi-Fi is very hard to come by, that could access the information and link to where this information is actually coming from. And we have a lot of examples that the colleagues from the federal agencies mentioned. They're on the notes. We're gonna digest them, and we also touch upon the points of local convergent hubs. Have a regional hubs that could provide immediate and effective attention to the local populations. And so I think that's it. Thank you.
So we're going to take all the information that we gathered over the last 3 days, and we're going to be working, in our kind of cohort leadership capacity to condense that down, and that will be a portion of the final report for the conference, and will be made available to all of you, and of course made available to the people who are helping to kind of turn RISE into an operational structure. So we're super happy that everybody's participated in these different cohort functions. And we look forward to seeing how that information gets operationalized over the next year. Thank you.
Valerie is the incoming chair of the NCSC Board of Directors. So my sense is she's going to be reading a lot of the report out materials. Valerie.
Thank you, Theresa, and thank you to everyone for here. This is the first I've seen this room from this perspective today, and I have to say I join Cecilio in saying, wow. I've been to a lot of meetings, maybe not so many that had this many hours in every day packed with things that we've done. What an amazing thing to see so many people still here. It's really a testament to the passion that this group has, and I'm glad to be part of it. It's been amazing. So on behalf of the National Council for Science and the Environment, I want to thank all of you. And thank once again the University of Albany. Really, really appreciate the opportunity and the ability to be able to host a meeting like this. It's really important. I want to thank all the sponsors. All of us are here from very many institutions. This wouldn't have happened without all of the sponsors as well. And to the steering committee, who put in a lot of time and effort with the whole group as well to make this happen. And for every single person in this room, because we wouldn't be doing this without every one of you. So I have 2 bits that I would like to share in closing. The first is a set of words that have arisen in my mind for the RISE acronym that emerged over the last few days. And it's not I'm not going to come up with this is what the 4 words should be, but what I have is a set of R words, a set of I words, a set of S words, and a set of E words that have emerged over these last few days as I've wandered through and participated with and built so many relationships. So that's the first R word, relationship. Re-envisioning, radiant, restorative, rewarding, respectful. I words, impactful, imaginative, illuminating, inclusive, and impassioned. S words, sustenance, secure, successful, stimulating, and still. E words, empathy, equity, embracing, ethical, and finally extraordinary. And these are words that emerged to me as we went through these few days, and I'm sure that you all have many others to add to this. And finally, following on an idea that was seeded last evening by President Velisa Rocho, I want everyone to just take a minute now, and as you're saying your goodbyes and you're thinking about the end of the program, and think about and articulate to yourself one thing that you can do as you leave here to advance the RISE concept and to help to build the network. You might even want to write it down. But even if you don't write it down, I would encourage you to say it to somebody on your way out of the room as we all say goodbye here today, as a way of anchoring what it is that we've done here today and how each of us can help to move that forward as we go ahead. So again, on behalf of the National Council of Science and Environment, I want to wish everyone a good trip home, and I wish you all good health, much happiness, and joy every day. Thank you.